My name is Kat Greger, and I'm a tax partner in the Ropes and Gray office in Boston. I'm here today mostly to introduce our keynote speaker, Andrew Strelka. And I will be intervening a little bit here and there with questions, because for those of you who know me, you will know that I can't stop myself from interrupting anyway. So we went ahead and planned that into the program. So to introduce Andrew, Andrew is a senior tax counsel at the White House in the new Biden administration. He was previously an attorney with Latham and Watkins in DC, and was a presence in Boston with our community, good friends with one of the partners at Latham who I'm also friends with. So I had the honor of getting to know Andrew in that capacity as a friend before he took on this very important role. And alas, we sort of lost him back to the government, although it is for a very good cause, because he is serving in the new administration and helping to set up the administration's team across all segments, the Department of Justice, Treasury, and the IRS. And in a sense, this is a return home for him. He has previously held positions at the IRS, the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice and the Tax Division, and the Obama White House, where he served as a tax advisor. So given this broad experience, I don't think I can think of a better person to be helping our new president in these early days as his team works to build up the tax policy, administration, and enforcement teams. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kat. I am honored to be here. And let me give the classic disclaimer that everybody hates to hear, that my comments are my own and they do not represent the position of the administration. Despite, I can say that with an American flag behind my back, but those are the words.
So Andrew, it's been about 2 months. What are your impressions so far of your new role?
Well, for me, it kind of feels more like 7 months, because I'm counting my time in the transition, folks have asked, what's it like working on a presidential transition? And I'm sorry to say my frame of reference is just completely off. Usually it's a bunch of overachievers working in a nondescript office building downtown DC. But for 2020, that operation was entirely moved online with some of the strictest and most stringent security protocols you can imagine. I mean, clearly they worked, because as evidenced by the lack of almost any significant leak of information. So basically, instead of working all day, all night, and never seeing your kids, you worked all day, all night, and everybody saw your kids. I think most of the cabinet knows my 3- and 5-year-old girls at this point. But back to your question, I think for those playing at home, they probably want to know, what is your? Perhaps I'll start with what it isn't. We have our share of brilliant economists here, the Council of Economic Advisors, chaired by Cecilia Rouse from Princeton. They provide empirical analysis for the president. The National Economic Council, which is directed by Brian Deese, they advise the president's matter of economic policy. And of course, our Treasury Secretary, Secretary Yellen, is a world-renowned economist. So I'm the nuts and bolts guy. My focus is entirely on federal tax compliance, where the rubber meets the road. We care about how taxpayers meet their federal tax obligations, not just if they are. But I'm part of a team, and it's term one, day one stuff. So I'm kind of all over the place. Since last September, my highest priority, of course, has been working with leadership on getting the cabinet in and getting them confirmed. And there's a significant amount of work we do with our Senate colleagues on that. But here we are on day 62, and we only have 2 spots remaining, OMB and the science advisor. Our labor secretary, Marty Walsh, was confirmed yesterday, the mayor of Boston, Kat. I will get to this later, but our Senate colleagues have been absolutely extraordinary in an unprecedented first. We're not even at 100 days. However, I will say, had they confirmed Secretary Walsh 5 days prior, they could have confirmed the mayor of Boston on St. Patrick's Day. So I think that was definitely a missed opportunity.
For sure.
Yeah. But back to your question, as we've gotten people into positions in the agencies, and the policy gears begin to pick up speed. Administrative rulemaking, the drafting of regulations, of course, this naturally increases in pace. And there is review, of course, at the top level. So I think you're going to start to see more of this, more of these things begin to roll out.
And so before we dive into substance, I'm going to ask you the question that I think everybody really wants to know, which is, what's your day-to-day life like? I know there's COVID, but we see you sitting, I think, in the White House. Is it just like a West Wing episode?
So, truth be told, I've never actually seen an episode of West Wing. There's 150 of them. I think they're on Netflix, and it's too much of a commitment. That's like double the episodes from The Wire. So, yeah, I have seen several episodes of Veep. I can say that I think when Veep came out, I think most people in the administrations, in the various administrations, have said that show really does hit home in a lot of ways. And I will share with you a very Veep-like story. First, I want to introduce someone to you. When I got the job offer to come on board, I had done this before. I was in the Obama White House, and so I knew this time around, you always ask for a deputy. You always ask for a number two. So I'm pleased to introduce White House Tax Counsel Jordan Oros. Let me see if I can do this. There she is in our safe distance waving. She's a rock star. She keeps the trains running on time. She probably had one of the most glamorous assignments over the last couple weeks. Everyone out there in Zoom land knows that when you need to interface with the IRS or really any taxing authority, how you do it, the procedure and manners to which you make your request or appeal is sometimes 90% of the battle, right? I mean, did you follow that rev product from the 90s that's weird, written in a weird font that hasn't been amended or overruled in decades, but it's still controlling? That same rule, those same rules apply to agencies as well. And there are certain channels you follow to make your request, and for a lot of good reasons, least of which is security. For example, you can imagine in this complex, there are incredibly tight controls on what leaves the complex, both physically and electronically. So for this particular request with the IRS, they will only process it if they receive it via fax, from a fax machine. And I know the people at the IRS, and I can email them, I can call them, but the process doesn't start the ball doesn't start rolling in the hill over there until they receive fax from me. So this is a huge problem in 2021 because it's not 1992. There simply is not a fax machine just sitting around idle in every office. You generally don't need them. They're kind of a security threat. The ones we do have, of course, are generally dedicated to a specific receiver on the other end. And it's not like Jordan and I, the tax team, can just pop into the situation room and like, hey guys, we use a fax. So Jordan had this glamorous assignment last week or 2 weeks ago to find a fax machine in the White House. And I want to flip to her for a minute. Jordan, how long did this take you? 6 hours. Okay, and where did you finally find it?
In the basement.
Okay, yes.
Next to the bowling alley.
Yes, she found it in the basement next to the bowling alley. So after spending all that time, did it work?
No, it did not.
It did not work, right? So to be fair, that's probably why the fax machine was down in the basement anyway. So in all seriousness, we do have a modernization effort underway with the IRS, and they put together an amazing secure data transfer protocol. And despite that hiccup, there really have been no delays. The IRS has a crew of extremely dedicated folks, and they're shouldering, of course, an ever-increasing list of responsibilities. So notwithstanding that story and those like it, I will echo comments that others have made about what it's like to work day one, term one. I mean, it's absolutely incredible to work with the people you get to work with every day. It's a huge honor. The pace, of course, is brutal, but we owe it to the American people to keep it that fast.
And so, speaking of term one, day one, what were when you jumped over from the transition right into the new administration? What were the biggest challenges you were facing in that moment?
Well, there's no need to repeat the economic and health-related issues that have been affecting all of us across the globe. But from a practical standpoint, here in the U.S., it's difficult, nearly impossible, really, for any substantial momentum to build up on an array of priorities without movement in the Senate. And the world's greatest deliberative body, had just really an unprecedented play. I mean, just cat it off. We had a violent insurrection on January 6th. Senator Loeffler conceded to Senator Warnock on the 7th. Senator Perdue conceded to Senator Ossoff on the 8th. But we didn't even get the 50-50 split until Georgia certified on the 19th. And so at that point, you need an organizing resolution just to operate in that environment. That didn't happen. That wasn't hammered out until February 3rd. And the second the ink is dry on that, the following week, the Senate pivots into the second impeachment trial of President Donald Trump. And throughout all this, we are attempting to get our nominees confirmed and get legislation moving that's going to help America and help American workers, and especially in light of the pandemic. And of course, during all this, most people are working at home. It's still a remote environment for many. But despite all this, to their credit, the Senate staffers, the worker bees of the committees, they really kept things moving. I work closest with the Finance Committee, and those folks did not stop pushing, and they still are pushing. So on our side, the mantra was, we're going to be proactive. Committee XYZ, here's my cell. Call me when your kid's distance learning starts. What do you need? Walk me through the day. What are your priorities for today? Let's get you what you need. And I think that hustle was not wasted, because despite all those challenges, here we are. We're a stone's throw away from a complete cabinet, and the American Rescue Plan is enacted law.
And yeah, which is amazing. I will say you exceeded my expectations in getting the rescue plan enacted. And maybe I was not the best place to have expectations in that regard, but I was certainly impressed. So speaking of nominations, what is the latest on the tax-related positions, which I know is going to kickstart everything that we're all super interested in in this conference?
So I can tell you're fishing for an exclusive, and perhaps our diamond sponsor, tax analyst, Tax Notes, is also fishing. That's not going to happen. I'll say to our non-U.S. friends of the line, the typical big three tax positions in the U.S. are Commissioner of Internal Revenue, Chief Counsel IRS, and the Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy at Treasury. And for those of us who've served at the Department of Justice Tax Division, we throw in the Assistant Attorney General for the Tax Division and say there's really 4 key tax positions. But of course, most of the attorneys in the Tax Division at Justice would never even admit to being tax lawyers. They're just litigators who happen to litigate tax law. But anyway, running down the list, the IRS Chief Counsel, of course, is William Paul in an acting capacity. The Department of Justice Tax Division is being run by my old section chief, David Hubbard, in an acting capacity. And I think we're all extremely lucky to have both of these experienced professionals helming these critical functions. They've done it before. The commissioner, of course, is Chuck Reddick. He was confirmed by the Senate and took office in 2018. But the recent news, of course, is on the 11th, President Biden announced 4 key Treasury positions, including what I think is likely not to be a surprise for most, Lily Batchelder for the Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy. Lily is a professor at NYU Law. She has previously served as the Deputy Director for the National Economic Council in the Obama White House. Prior to that, she was the Majority Chief Tax Counsel at the Senate Finance Committee. So she brings together a very impressive amount of experience for that role. And I think the administration is very grateful to have someone like Lily step up to serve once again. And I'll say that's the best soundbite you're going to get on this.
Understood. You also mentioned the American Rescue Plan. Can you tell us more about that legislation, in particular what I find the most interesting, which is the tax pieces, although I know my colleagues at Ropes often tell me I overstate their importance.
Sure. I mean, this is a tremendous win for the American worker. This act, this is not just some short-term thing. It's not a Band-Aid. It really is a framework. Some in the press have referred to it as transformational, and I personally tend to agree with that. It's going to change the course of the pandemic, and it's going to deliver immediate relief with incredible effects. Such as, which has been talked about a lot, is the incredible significant reductions in child poverty that we're expecting. More than 2/3 of the tax cuts and direct payments are going to go to families making less than 90 grand a year. The act forces the government to invest in things like public health, supplies, emergency response, testing, vaccine, testing in our schools so they can open. I mean, these are just like no-brainers, right? But it's the full package. More than 85% of households are going to receive a check. They're already going out. Adult dependents are not disqualified this round. Unemployment insurance benefits are extended through September 6th. There's aid for back rent, those who need help with their mortgage utilities payments, those who are recovering at risk for homelessness, and of course, going to the tax provisions. Some of the big ones that are really going to help folks in this country are the child tax credit. It's being increased from $2,000 to $3,000 per child. It's going up to $3,600 if your kid is under the age of 6. 17-year-olds can qualify this go around. The earned income tax credit, that's also getting juiced. 17 million American workers will see an increase by as much as $1,000. And the top occupations, the folks that will be receiving this, these are the frontline heroes. These are our cashiers, our food preparers, our servers, our health workers. There's a refundable tax credit that will be available to help childcare costs. And if you are lower middle income family enrolled in a health marketplace, the chances are your premium will either be significantly reduced or downright eliminated. So the president said, this is not the time to simply build things back the way they were. People were worried about a K-shaped recovery, but I think it's clear that well before COVID-19, we were already living in a K-shaped economy. And so that's one of the greatest strengths of this country is its economic engine. And I think legislation like this and other actions that I think that we've seen from the administration are going to be helping to ensure all Americans get to benefit from it. I can wave my hands all day around this, but of course, right now, the two key words, of course, are implementation and execution. This isn't just IRS issuing checks, right? Or extending the filing deadline. We are marshaling the skills, talent, and experience of the entire U.S. federal government to get this done. And our cabinet members they are not getting 1 minute to high five each other after their confirmations. This is public service. They are going to go through every part of this to get it done, to get it implemented correctly, and to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse along the way. You're on mute, Kat.
I had to at least forget to unmute once. So let's pivot a little bit. I can hear your passion, just like the rest of us when you get to the tax parts. But what are some of the other areas that you're most interested? In other words, what are you most excited about seeing the teams that you're building go forth and develop and implement?
I'll just, again, I'm not speaking for the administration. I will just speak personally. Something that an area that I'm interested in is, and this has come up a little bit in our confirmation hearings somewhat, is crypto and, personally, I'm interested in the concept of decentralized finance, which is an extension of the blockchain technology into more complex financial transactions. I'm not talking about, some simple crypto assets someone's holding for investment, but actual applications of the technology. So at the moment, you have people expending substantial amounts of energy to invest in trade positions in what's essentially a decentralized ledger, right? And what I think we a more useful conversation is how can we use that ledger? Not just speculate on its value. How, of course, can we increase efficiency? But of course, for us, you can't start walking down these roads without discussing the taxation of crypto. I popped in yesterday for the crypto panel yesterday with some friends of mine that were on there and enjoyed it. I'll also give a quick mention. There's a new book edited by a friend, former TLC, Lisa Zarlenga. Gives a good State of the Union out there on the taxation of crypto. When you look at the technology, which is really, you're looking at concepts, right? And where it has the potential to take us. I think you can quickly understand, this is not an area that you can just simply toss to the tax collector. There are no federal tax laws that specifically deal with crypto in the U.S. There are no tax cases where they really jump into the deep end of the taxation of crypto assets. It's not specifically addressed by any U.S. tax treaty. So what do we have besides a box in the 1040 that asks, yes or no, do you have crypto? We have this 2014 notice from the IRS that says crypto is property for federal income tax purposes. And, God bless the IRS. I think they're doing the best they can do in this environment. But, take a moment to think of this, and I'm going to go on for this, Kat, so just bear with me. Take a moment to think of this, less of an asset, more like an industry. Unfortunately, many people still can find crypto as Reddit fodder. Your libertarian friend who buys their coffee beans on Dogecoin and then has to tell the world about it. There's an ever-broadening spectrum of stakeholders with interest in blockchain and crypto. Of course, you've got your libertarian Dogecoin coffee drinkers, but you also have individual entity, institutional investors, and you've got an array of developers who are leveraging the tech. And so just take a beat for a minute and consider, let's just compare things. Consider it to the taxation of oil and gas. There's a whole body of law and information reporting compliance regime that seeks to sync the taxation with the specifics of the industry. Do you have a working interest? Do you have a royalty interest? Depletion, intangible drilling, and development costs. Those terms are as common in the industry as they are in the world of federal taxation. Through legislations and regulations, active workers and passive investors know the tax landscape before they jump in. Now, of course, this is a completely unfair comparison because crypto is a rather recent development compared to the age of oil and gas and Daniel Day-Lewis running around the West, right? So crypto and blockchain are still showing us what they can do as well. I think probably another fun comparison, though, maybe more apt, is let's just talk about offshore and under the radar holdings. Folks with considerable crypto assets and/or significant taxable transactions that are not coming out of the cold. They're not running to report these transactions or report their income. Just months after Bitcoin was invented in 2008, the U.S. and the UBS and the Department of Justice entered into their very public deferred prosecution agreement, or they announced the deferred prosecution agreement. That's when when the U.S. said enough is enough. Fast forward to today and consider all that the U.S. government has accomplished in rooting out undisclosed offshore financial holdings since that DPA went public. How did they do that? You want to go bottoms up, get the account holders, you got to get the banks to play. How do you get the banks to play? You get the banks to play by getting governments on board. How do you get the governments on board? You have agreements, you have treaties, you have BSA, you have FATCA, the Department of Justice's Swiss banking program. Thank you, Kathy Keneally. I mean, they announced a new DPA like a couple weeks ago. They're still doing them. So in that same period of time, though, where are we with crypto? I mean, so the IRS and the Justice Department, of course, are using all their tools. Look at the John Doe summons work. Look at how the IRS is working across its divisions to look at the micro and the macro of this and look for patterns. But where do we go next? I mean, the cat is out of the bag. The technology is already here. So my wife is on the senior staff at the Hirshhorn Museum, which is the Smithsonian Museum dedicated to modern contemporary art here in DC. Just the other day, we were discussing, there was this Christie's auction where there was a non-fungible token, NFT work of art, went for $69 million. This piece has absolutely no physical presence. It is purely digital and therefore infinitely reproducible. But it is specifically identifiable on the blockchain, and apparently worth $69 million. So, my sincerest condolences to the members of the IRS's art advisory panel and any tax court judge when they have to do a valuation case on the FMV of a NFT. Anyway, I could go on in this topic. Just this week, the New York Times editorial board discussed a proposal to close the U.S. tax gap by creating a new information reporting regime for financial institutions. Basically getting them to report inflows and outflows of certain taxpayers. But if the editorial board had posted that on Reddit instead, and got a bunch of Gen Y and Gen Z folks to comment, I'm sure they would have said, maybe the answer is not more information reporting, not more piece of paper. Perhaps there's a blockchain solution where financial inflows and outflows are recorded on a decentralized ledger. And let me be clear, I'm not advocating for any specific proposal. I just think this is an exciting area to consider. Thinking this more of a technology and less of a speculative investment. Okay, I'll do one more.
I completely agree. I've spent plenty of time probably with you and several others debating what kinds of tools we could even find. So it is an interesting area to be brainstorming about. So I'm going to give you an easy one, but one that is of really, really great and interest to the crowd listening today. Where are we going with guilty?
Okay, thank you for the softball. apparently your friend, my friend Ann Gordon may have thrown that question out at you. But for those following along at home, the global intangible low-income tax is an anti-base erosion provision to discourage companies from using the IP shift to move profits and effectively reduce their taxes. The idea, of course, is that somebody who has offshore investments of facilities and infrastructure and widgets is going to pay less guilty than someone who's just put IP out there. So I mean, it is public. It is for quite some time. The president has proposed substantially reforming GILTI as part of his plan to ensure a fair and progressive tax code. Of course, it's also important that we ensure American companies can compete on a level playing field. So in my mind, personally, I look at this two ways. First, I think there can be agreement that the intent of GILTI, the issue it is seeking to address, are largely viewed as very important issues by the stakeholders inside and outside the U.S. Our leadership has stated on the record that we look forward to working with both sides of the aisle in Congress to ensure that the United States negotiating position at the OECD helps American companies compete on a level playing field. But I think it's important to emphasize that this is new. In the U.S. Navy, even the most technologically advanced ships still go down a shakedown cruise, right? So the first question is, can we now measure the effects of GILTI, both intended and unintended? The second part is I would like to think about is, economies are not static. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was signed into law in December of 2017, and look what's happened since then. I mean, already feels like a decade since the Tiger King ended, and this was in 2017. So the world has fundamentally changed, and we've essentially been living with a fast forward button pressed down. So I think we're presented now with an opportunity to work with both sides of the aisle on potential reform. And so I think we're running low on time, but so just to go full circle, if I was a character on Veep, I'd probably say, Batman Begins was new, fresh take on a franchise, an amazing film. But did Christopher Nolan stop there? No, he built on that and made one of the best sequels of all time. It was like Godfather 2 type stuff. So anyway, I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Yep, me too. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait until we can do this again next time in person. And and for the audience, it is time. We want to give you